It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
All right, I'm going to ask, there are two questions here. They're very similar, so I'm going to put them together. So the first one is from Christopher, and he says, how much of my world should be in a single stock? My company just went public and gave me $40K in stocks and stock options. I'm a pretty financially safe guy and would love any advice. Love you guys. We love you too. But then Chris, this is not Christopher, this is a different person. This is Chris, said, hey, is there a defined percentage we may use for picking individual stocks like Tesla? Like, hey, I heard what you said, Brian, and I'd like to do that. So we have sort of two things here, but the answer to the two things is going to be similar. If I work for an employer and I have options and all this, how much should I keep in that one stock? Or if I'm just a lay investor that wants to have exposure to individual stocks or wants exposure to individual companies, how much should I have? What's the right metric?
So let me give it, I'm going to answer it this way. I think there's a range. First of all, if you're just the person that wants to start dabbling in individual stocks just because you're passionate about things, and just make sure your behavior is matching and you're not, disrespecting your financial order of operations and your savings goals because you're so excited to get into individual stock investing, because it's an emotional roller coaster.
For sure.
It should not exceed 5% of your net worth.
Yep.
That's kind of my threshold on that. Now,
and now can I add just a small?
Yeah.
I would argue it should not exceed 5% of your liquid net worth, of your portfolio value. So, don't include the equity in house or other types of asset. Only your portfolio. So if you've only got $100,000 saved, that's your liquid investment portfolio. I would not say that you should be investing more than $5,000 in any individual stock or in a group of individual stocks.
That's a great point, because I don't want somebody who has $600,000 of equity in their house, but only an investment portfolio of $100,000, thinking that they can do 5% of $700,000 when they really probably ought to be thinking 5% of $100,000. So great point on that. But here's the other thing: if you work for a company and they're giving you employee stock purchase plan where it's at a discount, that's, by the way, guys, that is free money.
Yep.
Especially if you think about they're buying it at 15% off of market value, and they do it whether it's the beginning of the quarter or the end of the quarter. That really is free money in a lot of cases. You have restricted stock units, you have stock options. A lot of those things have vesting dates, so you really don't even control if it's non-vested. So you have that money building in the background. But I do think that that's going to allow, I still like my 5% rule, but I'm going to give you some grace, give you some flexibility and margin that it could go all the way up to 10%. Now, once you get over 10%, that's danger Will Robinson area, because not only do you have your investment capital with this company, but you might, if you're working there, you also have your human capital, which is your wages and your hours worked. You don't want everything. You don't want all of your eggs in one basket. It's very, very dangerous. So that's why we try to figure out, how do you do this? 5 to 10%. 5%, by the way, if you're just dabbling. 10%, 5 to 10% if you work for this company. And then also tell you to be mindful of it, meaning that if you're in that employee stock purchase plan, turn it into an annual behavior, meaning that after that 12 months, you buy the stocks at the discounted price, you sit on it for 12 months to get the long-term capital gains tax rate, and then you flip it. You sell it, diversify it, bring it into your diversified portfolio, start the process all over again. That is a healthy behavior.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, Brian, because one of the things we see often, we work with a lot of executives and folks who are high up, and a lot of their compensation is in the form of employer stock or incentives or performance bonuses. So you may be below your 5% threshold, and then you hit a special date or a performance date, or you get a bonus, and all of a sudden it blows up. And now you have tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of your company stock. Here's what we're not saying. We're not saying like day one, go sell it, because maybe that doesn't make sense from a tax perspective, depending on what you have going on. What we are saying is your goal should be to limit that exposure. And all of those different types of incentives, whether it's an employee stock purchase plan or options or RSUs, are treated different from a tax perspective. So what you need to have is a plan for how you're going to systematically work through it. Because financial planning is not just investment management. Oh, I got to sell down to 5%. It's figuring out, okay, well, how does this work into the overall plan? How does this affect my taxes? Should I spread this over a couple years? What we're really saying is, don't be an ostrich. Don't stick your head in the sand and wake up one day and say, oh my goodness, I've got $1 million portfolio, but it's all in one company. What do I do? Or even worse, I had $1 million and then this thing happened and now it's all gone.
So let me ask you this, Bo. Do you count in that 5 to 10% unvested shares? Like RSUs or options that are unvested?
I would say you have to think about it, right? Because if you're on the treadmill and you have vested shares sitting out there, beautiful thing, or unvested shares, is if the stock price goes up $1 in value, you're going to be making that money. It's just money that you're not going to actually get until the future. So if you're at a company, you think you're going to be there for a while, you need to factor in what your non-available exposure is. Because we have a lot of folks who might have $1 million of non-vested exposure. Well, it'd be crazy for us to not take that into consideration of what they actually have access to them now and why they ought to think about getting off of that treadmill.
So what I'm hearing from you, just putting that in words, that's more of the art side
That's
of it.
exactly
You do
the
have to
art.
be careful. We give you these rules of 5, 10%, but everybody's a little different.
Yep.
And especially your situation might require we have to balance what's unvested, what's vested, and also build it into what are your goals, what's your income. All that stuff plays into it in a lot of ways. Here's one other thing, just because I'm a nerdy tax guy. If you get involved in these things, just make sure you understand. A lot of times these behaviors will get reflected in your W-2, meaning that when you do options, when you do restricted stock units, they might put some of that into your W-2 and increase your compensation. When that happens, there's also what's called a capital transaction that occurred. Don't exclude that off your tax return. It is one of my biggest pet peeves. So many tax notices I've received in the future, and I've tried to help clients work out. And by the way, I was not the preparer on these returns. I've helped clients on the investment side where their tax preparer included the income in their wages, did not list the transaction on the capital gains side of things, and then guess what? They get a notice,
got an IRS
and it
letter.
scares the heebie-jeebies out of them because they get a bill from the government saying you owe us $30,000 in taxes. When you actually probably had a loss because there was a transaction fee in doing the sale. It's just that you have to disclose that transaction to the government. So many tax preparers screw that up. So that's my public service announcement.